After 1 October 2022, 85 days down the line, we as a board in total met about 34 times, and the 34 meetings are broken down to 8 meetings of the board itself, 8 meetings of the Audit and Risk Committee, 4 meetings of the Board Operations Committee, 4 Governance and Strategy Committee meetings. The Governance and Strategy Committee is the committee where all the chairs of the committees meet together, the chair of the board, to integrate the work of the board. And then we also had 3 meetings of the Human Capital Committee, 4 meetings of the Investment and Finance Committee, and 3 the Social Ethics Committee. I'm starting here because from day one, when we accepted our appointment after the minister announced, as a board, we agreed that we would practice what has been labeled as governance unusual, that we would not be a board that waits for monthly reports and quarterly reports, given the dire situation that we found ourselves in as Eskom and the urgency with which, as a board, we wanted to support the executive team. So we adopted the mantra of being an engaged board, which means that we would be fully supportive of the executive colleagues, as opposed to being a passive board that only engages them occasionally. But we also felt that given the expectations, the very high expectations that the country has, that we would be as actively involved as we have been. Firstly, we do what we do with the veracity because we believe that Eskom is too big and too important to fail or for to be allowed to let South Africans down. And so we have taken on to the notion of MEGA that the CEO has been driving, MEGA being an acronym for Let's Make Eskom Great Again. We believe that against this overall thrust of MEGA is also a challenge to ensure that we also future-proof Eskom. And so our view as the board is that future-proofing Eskom means that you've got to keep the lights on while you simultaneously embark on a turnaround in terms of the challenges in the generations division, particularly, although the challenges go beyond generations. That secondly, we would ensure that as we figure out how to best retain the great talent that we have, but that we also find ways of securing the best technical talent outside in. You know that our erstwhile head of generations, Mr. Roland Matebula, announced his departure, and so we also have prioritized the agency to secure an executive leader for the generations division. And so the Human Capital Committee in these 4 meetings I mentioned have been working hard to ensure that together with our executive colleagues, get to embark on a talent acquisition strategy that will ensure that we secure the best engineers in the market to add capacity to our existing talent. We thirdly, as a board, wish to continue to putting hands on deck to undo the debilitating and ravaging legacy that state capture has left at Eskom. Fourthly, now that we're here this afternoon, after the news broke yesterday when we issued a statement, we will then be securing a chief executive to succeed our group chief executive, Mr. Andre de Ruyter, who steps down at the end of March. As a board, we have enjoyed working with Mr. de Ruyter and really continue to have found him to be a professional and collegial executive to have worked with. So in terms of this conversation, it is, as we indicated, that he had taken me into his confidence, that he intended to resign. This was on Monday the 12th, around 7:13 in the morning. It was in a pre-scheduled meeting that we had as part of our ongoing status update meetings. I accepted that resignation and agreed with him that he would afford me the opportunity to embark on a consultative process. As I'm sure you would appreciate, Eskom has got a systemic impact on South Africa and the various endeavors of South African and general life in terms of keeping the lights on and being vital to the economy of the country. And so sadly, while we were in the middle of those important consultations, the story leaked and we had to then post facto issue the statement that we did yesterday. When I engaged with Andre on his resignation, I was guided, among others, by our constitutional value of respecting each other's human dignity. And I assured him that we would give him an opportunity to also address a platform such as this, so he can take yourselves and the nation into his confidence in terms of how he arrived at the decision that he arrived at. For me, when he was open with me from day one that he would be reviewing his options sometime next year after reaching a milestone birthday, but I didn't expect him to then tender the resignation as soon as he did on Monday the 12th. From where we sit, Eskom is a huge enterprise. It's an enterprise that is large and complex, and as you know, also state-owned. Everything we do in the organization has huge ramifications on our modern civilization, on the economy, and therefore as a board, together with the shareholder, we remain steadfast in our commitment to ensuring, firstly, that we find quick ways of ameliorating load shedding in the immediate short term. Secondly, we have a draft turnaround plan in terms of how soon we hope to end load shedding or ameliorate it. And we, given the systemic nature of Eskom, we're in key consultative engagements with the shareholder and key principals to make sure that when we do publish such a turnaround plan, it's got the full buy-in and support of all key stakeholders. We will stay the course in terms of the dual strategy to keep existing fleet well-serviced and maintained, while at the same time embracing the need to improve the EAF, and equally while you simultaneously embark on the Eskom just energy transition. As you saw with the repurposing and the repowering of Komati, will also be following suit with other older power stations that will then be repurposed. So with those remarks, I'd like to firstly invite Mr. de Ruyter to also address you. Thereafter, I'll invite our shareholder minister, the Honorable Minister Pravin Gordhan, to also address you briefly. And thereafter, with your permission, that the Manjanja, we can have Q&A, and at the end, then I can wrap up. That suffices. Thank you so much.
Thank you very much, Chairman Mkwana. Good afternoon, Minister Gordhan, colleagues, members of the media. Thank you very much for attending this particular briefing. I want to keep my remarks very brief today. First of all, let me start off by saying that it's been an absolute honor and a privilege to lead an organization of the size and importance of Eskom. I'm really gratified that I was entrusted with this opportunity. I'm obviously disappointed that I could not achieve all of the objectives that I had set myself. I think the circumstances surrounding Eskom are well known. The operational challenges, the financial challenges, the challenges surrounding societal matters, including crime and corruption, as well as some of the issues that we have experienced in delivering the unbundling of Eskom and making sure that we can achieve our objectives in that regard. With that said, as the chairman said, I am in a position where I'm also dependent on the support of the broader political economy, and that support is absolutely critical to enabling the success of Eskom going forward. Given recent media reports, I'm unfortunately currently in a position where I do not regard that position as being tenable, and I have accordingly decided to step back, afford the shareholder and the board the opportunity to appoint a candidate to the position of Group Chief Executive who may be better suited, may be better equipped for the strategic and operational objectives at hand. And I have therefore decided to step back. However, I'm not abandoning ship. I intend to stay on until the end of March. My notice period, as per my contract, is 2 months, so I am staying on beyond that with the idea that I will be able to ensure that there is a handover to my successor, whoever that might be. I wish to express a particular word of thanks to the employees of Eskom. There are many honest, hard-working employees in this organization. In fact, the vast majority of our employees fall into that category. I have had the privilege of working with amazingly competent and dedicated people who go above and beyond the call of duty on a daily basis to keep the supply of electricity as uninterrupted as possible, given the constraints that we face from a generation capacity perspective, which of course doesn't fall within Eskom's remit to be able to resolve. And I can give the assurance to the media, but also to the public at large, that the people of Eskom are committed, dedicated to working as hard as they have been in order to drive the momentum of this business forward. I can also thank the many people who have reached out to me with personal messages of support and understanding and encouragement. I intend to take some time off, spend time with my family who have not seen much of me for the past 3 years, and who, after all, are very important to me personally, and with whom I'd like to spend some more time. There's nothing in the pipeline, so there's no job offers in the offing. That's not the reason why I've tendered my resignation. This is purely to enable the organization to resume a path to which it can then resume the key role that it plays in making sure that it can supply South Africa with electricity, but more importantly, enable the growth of South Africa as we make our transition to a more liberalized electricity market in the country. With those few remarks, Chair, I'm going to pause and thank you for the opportunity.
Thank you, Andre. May I please invite the Honourable Minister to also say some remarks?
Good afternoon, Chair, members of the board, Mr. de Ruyter and other senior managers and members of the media. Today is an important milestone in some ways in the history of Eskom. Not a positive one with Andre leaving, but certainly over the last few years, he has made a remarkable difference. And obviously, as he points out, much more needs to be done in order to return Eskom to the best performance it has had in its past. I just want to make 10 key points. Firstly, it is that, and all 10 are important programs, not necessarily exclusive or totally inclusive, that have been running during the last couple of years post the state capture period. None of them is going to be interrupted in any way, or stopped in any way, or diverted in any way. So the first is that the recovery from state capture and the combating of corruption in whatever form we find it, both as a consequence of state capture but also as a consequence of the current attempts by syndicates and groups of people who want to subvert the operations of Eskom and its normal governance processes so that they can fill their bank accounts and their pockets is going to stop. That fight against corruption, as we've seen recently with the concessions made by global firms like ABB, over and above the 1.5 billion rands that was paid directly to Eskom, they've also now paid another 2.5 billion rands to the let's call it the anti-corruption fund. The second is that post the end of 2019, early 2020, just before the COVID pandemic seized life in most parts of the world, the Eskom roadmap began to be implemented, and what we today call unbundling or restructuring of Eskom, with the first output being the creation of the transmission company. That will continue. The new board will apply its mind to once again review the names that we originally had for the transmission board and ensure that we have the right skills mix, which I was not happy with in the previous names. And sooner rather than later, that new board will be in place. And similarly, there will be efforts to ensure that other components of Eskom that are due for restructuring stroke unbundling follow suit as well. The third is in relation to the current generation plant. And in this particular instance, it's important that we now, under the guidance of the new board and the team of engineers that we have on that board, and others that have been commandeered from the, let's call it the convocation of people who were at Eskom for a period of 20 or 30 years, must together implement radical changes to the generation output, building on what we've done so far. But there's no doubt that the country is frustrated with the levels of load shedding, that we need to actually do much better to ensure that normal life returns to South Africa sooner rather than later, and that we contribute as Eskom to the pronouncements that the President made on the 25th of July, where the stopping of load shedding and the better performance from the generation plant were amongst the first of the items that were on the list of to-dos. The fourth is efforts to introduce more and more megawatts into the generation system must continue. And our sister department, the Minerals and Energy Department and NERSA, must begin to do some extraordinary things to cut further red tape, make it easier for people to invest in new plants, whether in whatever form they appear, solar, wind, battery, pump stations, or even gas, so that we have the kind of energy security that our economy and our society actually need and want. Without the addition of those additional megawatts, which Andre himself pointed to early in 2020, when we spoke about a deficit of 4,000 to 6,000 megawatts, about which very little has actually happened. Our attention needs to be drawn once again to ensuring that there's a faster process at play, including the kind of creative initiatives that was taken by Eskom under the leadership of Andre in making land available around the current power station. So that's the fourth element. The fifth is that the Minister of Finance has indicated his commitment to take a, let's call it, significant part of the debt of Eskom onto the sovereign balance sheet Work in that particular regard will continue, and under his watch, the necessary announcements will be made in February next year when he delivers his budget address. So we want to assure all investors who are invested in debt of some 300 billion rands to Eskom itself that, if you like, their money is safe, that the manner in which the board will guide Eskom through the coming transition from the current executives to the new executives is one that will happen in a responsible way, one that will take into account the interest of all the parties concerned. And if anybody has any doubts, you're welcome to reach out to us, either at a ministry level or at a board level, so that we can understand your concerns and respond to them. That's the fifth. The sixth, as the chair mentioned, the country's commitment is not just Eskom's commitment. The country's commitment to meeting the nationally determined contribution, which was put to COP26 and reaffirmed at COP27, and the plans that were developed under Andre's leadership in relation to the just energy transition remain in place, will continue to be implemented, and the first changes as far as Komati Power Station is concerned, which is, if you like, not just a national flagship, but a global flagship, will continue to happen at pace in terms of the original plan. And this is the commitment that the South African government has given to various parties who have been supportive of South Africa's efforts in this particular regard. Seven, there's no doubt, as has been pointed out, that the people factor within Eskom is absolutely key. In addition to the extremely skilled and faithful people that we've had within Eskom itself, we need to add more skills. We need to ensure greater integrity, and we need to ensure that everybody works towards one common national purpose. There are still termites within the system who want to undermine the efforts of people who want to do good by this country. And in time, the law enforcement agencies will identify those termites and ensure that they find their rightful place in orange uniforms at a faster rate than the current law enforcement efforts have actually seen. But bringing in skills and encouraging people to improve their skills is a crucial part of what we're doing. 8, as part of the people factor and skills development, is to reintroduce the engineering discipline within the power stations. And again, I think there are thousands of people who are working at the Eskom power stations and in the new renewables industry who want to ensure the right engineering discipline begins to emerge above the lackadaisicalness that might have crept in certain regards as well. So the employees at Eskom have a formidable task ahead of them in that particular regard. Finally, I want to pay tribute to Andre and his family for having made the choice, but also the sacrifices that he has made by taking a huge step in crossing the line from the private sector to the public sector. And by his own admission, there are many things that worked well and many things that still need to be done. And in that particular regard, his humility in accepting that more work needs to be done, but at the same time, he can spend time with his family, being rest assured that he's given his all to this particular important national project. To all the employees within Eskom itself, now is the time for you to stand up against corruption. Now is the time for you to back South Africa as a country. Now is the time for us to recognize that we work for the 60 million people in South Africa, not just for ourselves, and not just for our pockets. And don't be tempted by bribes. Don't be tempted by the handouts that people are willing to offer in order that they, in fact, get a lot more into their bank accounts than you ever will. So the honest people within Eskom need to now stand up and take the fight to the corrupt in whatever way possible, so that Eskom once again does return to its pride of place within the South African SOEs. Thank you very much, Chairperson.
Thank you, Honorable Minister. Thank you, Andre. Mr. Mantshantsha, I'm not sure. I see a plethora of comments in the chat room. As we've indicated, we are a bit challenged for time because we do have a scheduled board meeting back to back. There's some crucial approvals that we also need to have taking place this afternoon. But perhaps we can leave matters in your hands to try and help us navigate as expeditiously as you can.
Dr. Makwana, thank you. I thank you, Mr. Gordon. I thank you, Andre de Ruyter. Colleagues, the first thing is to apologize to the media colleagues who actually did travel to Megawatt Park. As you can all see, we are all working from remote locations. I've just been commandeered off the beach on the Wild Coast to come and be part of you today. So please do accept our apologies that you did not meet in person the people that you thought you would be talking to in the room. Let us do everything that we can, colleagues, to address all the questions that we have at present. I'm going to request my colleague Nomaswazi Shongwe, she is there with you in the room, to read the first 5 questions for us. It would help us if those questions are particularly about the matter at hand today and to whom they are directed. And we will then go to the colleagues that are physically present there to take their oral questions as well. Please take us through the questions. Thank you.
Thanks, Siko. The first question is from Helmo Prius. He wants to know, can you please let us know whether the transmission company will be a separate legal entity with its own board before the end of 2022? Antoinette Slabbert from the report wants to know, do you believe the coal fleet is fixable, or is the goal of 75% EAF unrealistic? Was the decision to stop buying diesel that of management or the board? The next one is from Chris Yelland at EE Business Intelligence. He wants to know, Mr. Makwana, as the new chairman of Eskom, in your engagements with the Eskom CEO, Mr. Andre de Ruyter, to date, do you believe that Mr. de Ruyter is a traitor that is deliberately and actively agitating for the overthrow of the state by failing to deal with load shedding? Would you like more?
No, let's allow Ndate Makwana to respond to all those. Please go ahead, Mr. Makwana. I'm sure the last question you may want to pass on to Pravin Gordon. He may be more qualified to answer it.
Thank you, Mr. Mantshantsha. The first question in terms of the transmission company, as I indicated, the board has been within its term now for 85 days. The matter of ensuring that we manage the process is on the agenda and radar screen of the Governance and Strategy Committee. We will be engaging quite soon with the search firm that had initially been appointed. We have all the CVs that had been submitted, so we will ensure that that matter is concluded expeditiously. Whether it will be immediately in 2022 or at the latest early 23 January will depend on a number of other factors that boards go through. We don't just flip a switch. We go through processes of engaging a short list and ensuring that in line with our MOI, we're able to conclude those processes. Equally, this is a process that may require extensive consultation with our own employees so that they are on full page of what that means for their day-to-day. Equally, our investment and finance committee is going to have to look at the balance sheets, income statements to make sure we do everything responsibly in a manner that doesn't cause harm to the ongoing liquidity of Eskom. The realistic question about whether the target of the EAF is realistic, as I indicated, we have had a first step as the board through our board operations and performance committee. We have a draft roadmap that we're now engaging all the key stakeholders through to ensure that when we do go public with it and implement it with the requisite timelines, we know that we've got the full support of the full spectrum of all the key decision makers that would have to support it. Some of them the Honourable Minister mentioned already. I don't think it's within my purview to determine whether Mr. de Ruyter is a traitor or not. I think that question should rightfully be tabled to its source, where those statements would have been uttered. As I indicated, we worked well with Mr. de Ruyter. We continue to work well with him. And we have found him as a board to be responsive to our requests, as and when we need things done, they've been done within the deadlines that we've set. So I don't think I'm qualified to answer whether Mr. de Ruyter is a traitor or not. I don't know if, Honourable Minister, there's a flavour you wish to give to all the three questions from your perspective as shareholder minister. Thank you, sir.
No, thank you, Helmo. There's very few days that are left in 2022, so let's be practical. A lot of excellent work has been done, if you like, at a practical level to move towards an independent transmission company. You'll also be aware that there is a piece of legislation in Parliament which, when it is passed, will change the structure of the electricity industry in South Africa and will have a significant impact on the kind of new institutions that will begin to operate, possibly in the next few years, and enable South Africa to be able to say that we are in line with some of the world's best practice in that particular regard. So I think a lot of work has been done. The formalization of those processes is what we're waiting for. On the question of diesel, nobody's decided to stop buying or buying. We need, in the current context of poor plant performance, as much diesel as we can get. But there's a balance between what can be afforded from within the Eskom books itself and what the demands are as far as running the OCGTs is concerned. And it is in this regard that we continue to negotiate with the necessary arms of the state to support Eskom, financially speaking, in order that its capacity to complement whatever is happening in relation to the normal operations of the plant with a short supply of diesel for the OCGTs themselves. In time, as you know, those OCGT plants are due to be converted into ones that actually utilize gas, but we are doing more talking than delivering in this particular regard. And the talk will stop and the delivery must actually start. And all those responsible for that delivery must get on with the job at hand. In relation to overthrow of the state and traitor, the emphatic answer is no. I'm not going to qualify it anyway, Chris. I think that's unfair. Whatever commentary one might have about any individual, it is absolutely unfair and uncalled for to use that kind of language for somebody who tried their best to get the Eskom out of the mess that it was in onto a different kind of platform. And the more knowledgeable people amongst you know that the mess didn't start in 2019. It didn't start in 2009 or 10 or 11 or 12. It started a long time ago. And there's a long list of people who must be held responsible for decisions that they didn't make in the right way. But I leave that to your Christmas imagination as you go into this period. So take my answer as an emphatic no, Chris. Thank you.
Thank you, Honourable Minister. Perhaps, if we may, Mr. Machanza, shall we take the last round? Because sadly, we also have time challenges.
Tate Makwana, you're getting me into trouble with my colleagues. There's 8 slides of questions. We have now closed the chat. Swazi, please can you give us the 6 top questions that you can for all the colleagues to respond to? And we have to apologize again to you all, ladies and gentlemen, for taking the trouble, but we don't have sufficient time. Thank you.
Siko, can we take the questions inside the room, possibly? There's some journalists that are looking to ask a couple of questions.
Thank you very much. That's a great suggestion. Please, can we have the first 5 colleagues with mics to sit with their questions and to whom they are directed to? That would help.
Kyle Cowan from News 24. My question is for the chairperson, Mr. Makwana. You were provided an opportunity to defend the CEO of Eskom, Mr. de Ruyter. Today, you have failed to do so. You have failed to do so when the public utterances were made. Can you give any indication whether you and your board are strong enough to withstand political pressure to not do to Eskom what has been done in the past? Are you scared of Minister Gwede Mantashe?
Thank you, Kyle. Let's take the next set of questions. Please pass on the mic to the next colleague.
Yes, it's Heidi Jacos from ENCA. It's very similar to Kyle's question. The Minister of Energy, Gwede Mantashe, last week Thursday and on Saturday used the words, Eskom is actively agitating for the overthrow of the state. There has been no response from the Minister of DPE. There has been no response from the board about this. And could this have possibly pushed the CEO to resign, as there is political interference or possible political interference here? Secondly, Matla Power Station Unit 6 was on fire yesterday. Is there any concern about that? You've had almost 13 CEOs in the last 10 to 13 years. This is not creating a stable picture for South Africans. What are you going to do about this?
Thank you, Heidi. The next colleague, please.
It seems we have exhausted all the questions in the room. Thanks, Konati.
Even better. Thank you, Mr. Sambo. Tate Makwana, please respond to the questions on the attacks on Andre de Ruyter and the executive of Eskom. Can I first, though, ask Thomas Conradi to talk to us about the fire at Matla Power Station? Thomas is the acting generation head. I believe he is in the room.
And Secretary, in all fairness, I'll handle the political questions.
No problem. Thank you, Mr. Gordon. Thomas Conradi, are you able to address us on Matla, the fire and the damage? Aubrey, please tell me what's going on.
Okay, Sekolati has just left. I think he's going to attend to an urgent matter. He was here, but he just left. Thanks.
Andre, are you able to shed some light on how much damage, if any, on that particular unit at Matla before we answer the other questions?
Yes, Sikunati. A fire did break out at Matla Unit 6 outside the boiler on the fuel oil dispensing system. At this stage, we have no indication of any foul play, so let me put that one to bed. We are investigating, of course, if there was anything untoward. The damage to the unit is not severe. It's mainly cabling, but there's no structural damage, and our teams are hard at work to return the unit to service. At this stage, I'm unable to give you a return to service date, but I can also confirm that no adjacent units suffered any damage in this particular incident. I trust that suffices.
It absolutely does. Thank you, Andre. Mr. Gordon, please can you deal then with the questions on the attacks on Eskom?
Yes, in respect of Kyle's question, one doesn't have to have public spats or differences in order to discourage whoever it might be in cabinet or outside from making statements that are unhelpful at a time when we need to engender confidence, both in the institution, but also in government as well. So each of us has a different style in terms of how we manage these matters. And I can assure you that Mr. Mantashe doesn't want anybody to be scared of him by any stretch of the imagination. Similarly, in respect of Heidi's questions, those hyperboles that were used were precisely that. But at the same time, as I said in my remarks as well earlier on, the country is definitely frustrated with load shedding. We've got to concede that. It is upsetting business. It is upsetting manufacturing. I've got a list of manufacturing companies that are looking for assurances. Can you ask Eskom, please, to not load shed us so we can produce X and Y, which are essentials for example, human consumption and utilization. And where possible, I must compliment the distribution colleagues within Eskom for coming to the party. And it's not always possible to do so. I'll give you a concrete example that go back a few months. When hospitals were impacted by load shedding. And there was a remarkable effort from the National Department of Health, certain provincial departments of health, and Eskom distribution to find ways of ensuring that hospitals are not impacted by load shedding. It hasn't reached the 100% mark yet, but it shows that different arms of government can collaborate in certain areas which are extremely sensitive and necessary to ensure that we don't have discomfort on the one hand and disruption on the other hand, whether it is in areas like health or whether it's in certain areas of business itself. As far as the question of CEOs is concerned, you are right. These are far too frequent changes as far as CEOs are concerned. And what we do require is a greater deal of continuity, more stability. But that is why it is important that the people I describe as termites, those who want to play a destructive role rather than a constructive role in a key area like energy supply and energy security, must be the people to whom you must address, all of us need to address, reduce the pressure on Eskom from unwelcome sources. And those who want to play a nefarious part in upsetting an important institution must be identified, must be named, and must be dealt with, not by just the law enforcement agencies, but by society as well, so that we don't just focus on one or two individuals who are easy targets, inverted commas, but focus on the real culprits, both in the past and in the current situation, who are creating misery for millions of people in South Africa. So that's my Christmas wish to you, if you like, as we go forward. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Honourable Minister. If I may then wrap up our discussion from where we stand as the Board of Eskom. Our duty to Eskom is to make sure that we do what responsible boards should do. Responsible boards ensure that they work hard to ensure that there's executive leadership stability. And it is in this context that we are ensuring that we are going to work tirelessly to ensure that we secure the next leader of Eskom. And we are delighted that our incumbent Group CEO will be there to, as best as possible, ensure that we've got a seamless handover and transition. Secondly, responsible boards ensure that the companies they lead have a semblance of predictability in terms of how it executes its plans and strategy. And so we are working hard at that to ensure that as soon as possible, we arrive at a agreeable plan that all stakeholders will feel comfortable with in terms of ending load shedding and beginning to stabilize the grid and the dependability of supply, continuity of supply in terms of available megawatts. Thirdly, responsible boards ensure that the boards that they lead, the companies they lead, the companies thereof are liquid, and so liquidity is very important to us, and ensuring that we act responsibly given the magnitude of the numbers that the Minister shared with you earlier, that we have to ensure that are well managed and that governance prevails. Lastly, in terms of the products and services that the company offers, we have a duty, and this is where the load shedding challenge comes, to ensure that we get our hands on it, ensure that in the short term we are able, and short term I'm talking weeks to a month, that we're able to ameliorate the impact that the Minister has so ably articulated in terms of its impact on the economy and on daily lives and livelihoods. And then, of course, by extension, we would then have a long-term plan, as indicated, that will be signed off as soon as practically possible. So we firstly once more apologize that time is a bit limited this afternoon because we've had to chase a few urgent briefings of this nature, while we at the same time, in keeping with what I've just said, we have a scheduled board meeting to make certain key approvals to ensure that the business of Eskom continues to operate without being disrupted by delays in approving certain important matters. So with that, ladies and gentlemen, we thank you, and we will continue to avail ourselves to engage with yourselves in due course. Thank you so much. Over to you, Dr. Manjanja.
Thank you, colleagues. Thank you, Mr. Makwana. Colleagues, we unfortunately couldn't take all the questions, as you do know. We will be back online again and have another briefing in the next few weeks, where we will again take your questions. Please accept my apologies for the short afternoon and for the delays. As you can see, things are being done really. We are in a situation where we have had to put this together in a very short space of time. Have yourselves a good weekend, those that are going into the weekend, and thank you very much, colleagues. Thank you, Mr. Gordon, Mr. De Ruyter, Mr. Makwana. Have a good afternoon.
Thank you.
Thank you, and thanks to everybody else.
Thank you, Minister.